Hello, goblins and ghouls, and welcome to my Haunted Life podcast. I'm your host, Angela Hartshorn, and today we are celebrating one of my favorite witchy holidays, Walpurgisnacht, with some of the really freaking cool ghost stories I found from the Brocken itself. Welcome, my darlings. Welcome to Season 3. I think it's Season 3. Honestly, I probably should have checked on that. We're going to say it's Season 3 for the time being. I have missed you guys so much. We have a very small little active community, and man, have I missed you guys so much. Gotta be honest, so last year was a bit mentally trying for me, so I've changed some things around. I've changed personally, financially, business-wise, all that. For the podcast, some changes. I started some of these last time we were around, but still. We are sticking to the 2 episodes a month, coming out on Thursdays, except for this special one, and it's coming out early, just so it, corresponds with the holiday as it needs to. And there's gonna be some spooky snippets here and there. Not every fill-in week, but I'm gonna definitely try to do some. A lot of the stories coming up, I already have corresponding spooky snippets that I found weird shit in my research. For some reason, a lot of decapitations. We have a lot of decapitations coming. Decapitations, there we go, coming up. So, that's fun. But yeah, so I want to do more stuff there. I want to do more videos. I want to do more TikToks. I want to do more Patreon content, because let's be honest, that's probably the most important one. So I'm excited to get right into it. And let me tell you, I have a backlog of stories and experiences from last year that never made it onto the podcast. So I'm very excited. And most of them are all ready to go. It's amazing. I'm trying to think if there's any other housekeeping. Oh! I have set it up already, and I'll probably make a cute little ad for it as well. But when this episode comes out on actual Walpurgisnacht, I'm also going to be doing bone readings at Kronk Art and Curiosities for those in the Colorado Springs area. If you are not in the area, email me, and we could totally set you up a session. If you're not familiar with bone readings, they are... I'm trying to think of the best way to describe this offhand. Which is funny as I look at my hand and I'm like, bones! So, bone readings are a divination tool. I should say bones are a divination tool. It's like throwing lots. It's throwing something down, looking at it, and interpreting the meaning of where things fall. I do bones and curios. So, a lot of fun for Walpurgisnacht with the thinning veil and everything. And then, that night, on the Patreon, we are going to be doing a live Walpurgisnacht ritual, and this is one I wrote during the pandemic for my witchy boxes. And because it's Walpurgisnacht and there's something weird in my backyard, we don't know what it is. Totally gonna pull out the ghost hunting equipment. I'll probably run it during the ritual, because I think that could be very interesting. So that's going to be fun. Any other housekeeping? Not a whole lot. Getting back on the road here with Oddities and Curiosities Expo. Very excited because I'm already missing it. I'm like jonesing. Even though I had one already this year. But the next one is Tulsa. So if you're in the area... What day is it? It's mid-May. Should have looked that up. I think it's the 11th. 10th, 11th? Come out and see us. It's a lot of fun. And, tell me if you have any ideas of where to go investigating while out there. My buddy Shell from the Boutique is really looking into some... I laugh because Shell does not like to go ghost hunting with me. It's not her vibe. It would be her vibe if she didn't attract everything. So she's actually mustered up the courage to come with me and has really gotten into the research. So I'm very excited for that. I don't know how it's going to turn out, but it's going to be freaking fun one way or another. So I've already told you what we're talking about. I'm really excited. But anyways, on this week's episode, we are celebrating Walpurgisnacht, the halfway to Halloween, or Samhain, the night before Beltane, which I realize I didn't go into Beltane at all, but that's okay. The night the witches gather on top of Mount Brocken in Germany and dance and revel all night. This area is famous for its myths and legends, and I have found some really good ones to share with you. So let's get into it, shall we? Grab yourself a cup of tea, make sure the doors are locked and the sage is close by. I have a story to tell you. Or I should say, the bonfires are lit. Now to the Brocken the witches ride. The stubble is gold and the corn is green. There is a carnival crew to be seen, and Squire Urianus will come to preside. So over the valleys our company floats, with witches a-farting on stinking old goats. From FAUST, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. So, to start today, I'm going to give a brief background and history on Walpurgisnacht. Now, when I say brief, it's still 3 pages long, and I know some of you like to fast forward, so, couple minutes, 2 minutes, 3, I'm not sure. I had to count, it's 3 pages. So, I will go through it quickly, I promise. So, Walpurgisnacht is the night of April 30th. It's halfway to Halloween, or Samhain. And because of that, it's considered one of the times of year that the veil is the thinnest. Hence, the telling of ghost stories. It is believed that witches would fly to the top of the Brocken in Blocksberg, the highest peak in the Harz Mountains, by broomstick or goat, to dance the night away by the light of the bonfires welcoming spring. Traditionally, blessings and protection rituals were conducted on livestock as they moved them out to summer pastures. Bonfires were lit and people would dance and make noise around the fire to scare away predators. During the 19th and 20th century, Walpurgisnacht became popular in art and literature, most notably in Goethe's well-known play FAUST, which I read a segment of that earlier talking about Walpurgisnacht in particular. Goethe famously had an interest in the occult and visited the Brocken peak, hiking a path that is still memorialized as the Goethe Way. Walpurgisnacht is even mentioned by Bram Stoker in his short story Dracula's Guest, which you will hear the excerpt from later on the podcast. Quick sidebar, you can find this story first published in 1914 in a short story collection, Dracula's Guest and Other Weird Stories. So that just sounds awesome, and I'm going to have to find that. In Bavaria, this night is sometimes called Hexennacht. I'm not even going to attempt the Dutch, which literally translates to Witches' Night, on which revelers dance and dress as witches and demons, set off fireworks, dance and play loud music, which is said to drive the witches and the winter spirits away. It started as a part of a lot of different festivals, which we're going to go into a little bit. I promise only a little. But it started as part of festivals of witches and pagans to welcome back the spring, but it morphed into a night to scare away those witches. Way fun fact, the name Walpurgisnacht is actually named after Saint Walpurga, who was an English nun. She was summoned by her brother Windbald to serve as abbess of his double monastery of monks and nuns in Heidenhelm in modern-day Germany. After the death of her brother, she became the main abbess. I just like the word abbess. I think that's fun. Most of her work in Germany was baptizing pagans. Wonder how nice she was. After her death in 779 AD, her tomb started oozing healing oil. This was seen as a miracle, and she was canonized by the Catholic Church. May 1st became her feast day because it was when her relics were transferred away from the monastery. As we all know, a lot of early Christianity adopted a lot of pagan customs, dates, holidays to make it easier to convert the pagans. This worked out for the German pagans. However, because most of St. Walpurga's symbolism was taken from traditional German goddesses, she's considered the patron saint of coughs, storms, and hydrophobia and sailors. St. Walpurga's symbols are the spindle, grain, and a dog. That's where the hydrophobia comes in, which apparently is rabies. For the traditional pagans, grain symbolized a good harvest. Dogs were considered the familiars for German goddesses, and the spindle is associated with Frau Hulda or Holga of Grimm's fairy tale fame. They were able to continue their pagan customs in the name of a saint, so no one would actually get in trouble. Saint Walpurga from then on became intertwined with witches. So some of the other customs of Walpurgisnacht are lighting bonfires, dressing up in costumes, making lots of noise, believed to scare away evil spirits. So this meant banging, ringing bells, drums, cracking whips, and beating planks of wood into the ground. I've heard that, description of beating planks of wood into the ground numerous times. Apparently, later, it became shooting firearms in the air. So that's fun and safe. Bread and butter and or honey were left in the fields to ensure a good harvest or to feed phantom hounds that wandered the countryside at night. I wonder if that's like a wild hunt thing. Or if there's just wild phantom hounds wandering Germany. Either way, cool. The lady of the house would jump over a broom, and any old brooms would be burned. Blessed sprigs of juniper, hawthorn, ash, and elder trees were hung around the home and barn. Trick-or-treating, with a big emphasis on tricks this time of year. In Bavaria, youths roam the neighborhoods pulling mischievous pranks such as wrapping cars in toilet paper and smearing doorknobs with toothpaste. In Germany, there's a lot of trash can flipping and stealing plants from gardens, as well as garden gnomes. I totally probably would have been that youth that stole plants. I might still, not the youth part, but I still might steal plants. In Finland, where the holiday is called Vappu, people run screaming through the streets, wearing masks and carrying drinks. Straw men, basically scarecrows, would be dressed up in people's old clothing and imbued with all the bad luck, illness, and negativity from the last year, then thrown into the bonfire. In Germany, young girls were dressed as witches and carry broomsticks through the streets. And in the Harz Mountains, bonfires are lit, and thousands of people dressed in costumes come from all over to dance and celebrate on a plateau called the Hexentensplatz near the town of Thale. So there's like that video of the witches dancing from a few years ago, and they're all in their paint and everything. It almost looks like they're doing an electric slide, but it inspired a lot of people to do the witcheroos kind of thing. That's where this video apparently came from. Just like at Halloween, ghost stories are told. The Harz Mountains are notorious for myths and legends, for fae and for ghosts. This is around the area that the Brothers Grimm went to gather stories. Not the exact area, because I had to double check and make sure we didn't have any Grimm stories from here. They're about like 40 miles away, but it's close. Luckily, there were others going out and collecting stories in our exact area. I found books from the 1800s that collected some of these stories. I love reading these old manuscripts so much. I just sat and read these cover to cover digitally, but you know what I mean. So much. I love reading these. I'm just going to read you straight what I found. The Wild Huntsman. Earl Eberhard von Württemberg rode one day alone into the forest to amuse himself with the chase. Suddenly he heard a loud roar and noise, as of a hunter riding furiously past. He was terrified, dismounted in haste from his horse, and approaching a tree as if for defense, cried aloud to the imagined huntsman, asking if he intended violence. "No," replied the now visible form of a hunter. "I am a man like thyself, and stand before thee quite alone. I, too, was formerly a noble. I found such pleasure in the chase that I besought God to permit me to hunt until the judgment day. Unhappily, my sinful wish was granted, and For 450 years I have hunted the same deer, but my race and name are known to no one." Thereupon the ghostly hunter vanished. Hans van Heckelberg, a master of the hunt in Brunswick, had an unhappy dream one night on the Harzberg. It seemed to him in his dream as if he struggled with a huge wild boar, which conquered him after a long battle, and that he died of his wounds. He could not drive this terrible dream from his mind. Shortly after, he encountered a boar in the Harz, similar to the one in his dream. He attacked him. The struggle remained long undecided. At length, Hans conquered and slew the animal. Rejoiced to see the boar stretched at his feet, he kicked the tusk with violence, exclaiming, "Thou shalt not yet kill me." But he had struck with such force that the sharp tooth pierced his boot and wounded his foot. At first Heckelberg paid no attention to the wound, but continued the chase. On his return, however, the foot was swollen, that the boot had to be cut off. He hastened back to Wolfenbüttel, but the vehicle shook the foot so that he was obliged to stop on the way to Walpurgisnacht, where he died. Before his death, he expressed a wish that he might hunt forever, and his rash desire was granted. The Tut Ursel, or Tut Ursel, always accompanies him. At midnight, when in storm and rain, Heckelberg, with horse and dogs, tears through the Thuringen forest, the Harz and the Heckel forest. The night or death owl flies before him, which the people call the Tut Ursel. The wanderer, when he hears the ghostly hunt, listens in terror to the barking of dogs, and hears the hoo-hoo of the chase and the ooh-hoo of the death owl. In a cloister in Thuringia lived in the primeval days of the convents a nun named Ursula, who always disturbed the choir of nuns by her howling singing. Hence she was called Tut Ursel. But after her death, she disturbed them even more than in her lifetime, for at 11 every evening she poked her head through the hole in the church tower and tooted dreadfully, and every morning at 4 she joined her voice in the matin song. For some days the holy sisters bore this lamentable disturbance, but at last one morning one of the nuns whispered in fear to her neighbor, "That is certainly the Ursel." Instantly the music ceased. Their hair rose to mountains. The nuns rushed out of the church, screaming, "Tut Ursel! Tut Ursel!" And no punishment could induce a single nun to enter the church again until a Capetian monk from a monastery on the Danube, noted for his sanctity, was summoned. He condemned Tut Ursel to banishment in the Harz, and to bear the form of a death owl. Here she encountered Heckelberg, and found as much delight in the hoo-hoo of his eternal hunt as he in her hoo, and so they hunt forever in company. Another story is that the screech owl is a nun who was false in her vows and left her convent to follow Heckelberg. The origin of this legend belongs to the ancient pagan days. It is even disputed that a person called Heckelberg existed. And if so, the legend is ages older than the 16th century, the time when he is said to have lived. The White Lady. The Bleckenberg family ghost is called the White Lady. A portrait bearing this name hangs in the castle, said to be the likeness of a Countess of Orlamund. The legend is as followed. The Earl Otto van Orlamund died in 1340. Several dates are given, and left a young and beautiful widow, Agnes by name, a duchess by birth, and the mother of 2 little children, a son of 3, and the daughter of 2 years. The widow lived alone in the Plassenburg, and thought often it were better to marry again. One day a remark of the Earl, Albert the Handsome von Nuremberg, was repeated to her. I would willingly espouse the fair Countess Agnes, but for the 4 eyes. The Countess fancied he meant her 2 children. Seeing they stood in the way of her marriage, she resolved to free herself of them, and engaged a man named Hagar, with promises of rich gifts, to murder them. The murderer is said to have confessed his crimes on the rack. According to another tale, the Countess murdered them herself by sticking pins in their skulls. Her guilty spirit cannot rest, but wanders the Orlamund and Bleckenberg. Her appearance always betokens death in the family. Frau Bertha is also called the White Lady. She haunts the imperial royal palaces, and also Darmstadt and Karlsruhe. As family ghost, she harms no one, greets everyone she meets, never speaks, and always wears a white veil and carries a bunch of keys in her girdle. The red-haired Trude. At a time when very few men lived upon the earth, when towns and villages were few and very wide separated, when there were no roads in the mountains, and before Romulus and Remus were rescued by the motherly wolf on the yellow timber, or Nesaku fell in love with Odysseus, there stood a house on the site of Schloss Eisenberg, inhabited by a widow and her daughter Trude. Deeper in among the mountains stood an old stone slough on the granite wall connecting the Eisenstein and the opposite lying Westenberg, which had been bought and was inhabited by a father and his fair daughter Isel. Nobody knew who the father was, but it was supposed, as people do in many cases, that he was some fallen and disposed prince. During the absence of the prince and princess Isel, on a journey, a stranger, handsome and gay, without money, sack, or scrip, but rich in self-confidence and flattering words, sought hospitality of the widow and her daughter. It was warmly received and entertained. Rolf fell in love, in quotations, with Trude, and a blissful summer was spent gathering wild fruits and flowers and hunting birds' nests among the mountains. The nuptials were near, and the widow was busy with the bride's trousseau, when unexpectedly with autumn arrived the foreign prince and fair Isel from their mysterious journey. Ritter Rolf, it must be confessed, was very naughty. With an eagle eye, he perceived the radiant charms of Princess Isel, and poor Trude was forsaken. The widow reproached him for his perfidy, but he replied, "The eagle mates with the eagle, and though I have fled from a severe father, I am of noble blood, and have found a brat of my own ring." The widow swore revenge and consoled the weeping Trude, begging her only to wait till Walpurgisnacht and her perfidious lover should be punished. She made a league with the evil spirits of the mountains and the air, and devoted herself to the unholy arts of a witch. Walpurgisnacht arrived. The widow stood on the balcony of her house and invoked the demons and witches who swept through the night, which rested black as destruction on the mountains, heavy as the day of wrath and vengeance. From the Brocken broke a terrible tempest. Awful thunders rolled, lightnings in furies, serpents cut their way through the heavens and mountains, and a tremendous flood swept down from the Brocken and destroying all in its course. The coalers hung to the rocky walls, but Princess Isel looked calmly on the wild scene, saw the rocks rent on which her father's castle stood, and it, her lover, father, and servants all swept away. And as she too was about to perish, a tall manly form, which majestic head and black locks, probably the fairy king, seized her in his strong arms, wrapped her in a white mantle, and vanished. Poor Trude, from the balcony of her mother's side, saw the faithless Rolf carry down the torrent, threw herself over after him, and when the flood had subsided, the widow found them in each other's arms, washed up on the banks of the river. So those stories come from Legends and Tales of the Harz Mountain by Tufi Laudner from 1881. Now, of course, those stories, most of them are much, much older, and he's just out collecting these legends in 1881, or at least that's when it was published. Now, I'm going to tell you a slightly more modern one, and by more modern, I mean like 50 years later. And that is of Harry Price and his goat. Sorry, Harry Price. What did I say? I don't remember. And I found this story on Atlas Obscura. So back in 1932, Harry Price, an early paranormal investigator and debunker, decided to test just how mystical the Brocken truly was by performing a ritual there to turn a goat into a little boy. Over the course of his long career, Harry labored to bring reason and a scientific eye to the world of the metaphysical. The New York Times has an article about his book, Confessions of a Ghost Hunter, from 1934, which it writes, Harry Price is, as an indignant poltergeist is said to have protested, a man who puts the kibosh on the spirits. He has been investigating psychic phenomena for 30 years, and he was the founder and director of the British National Laboratory of Psychic Research, which was absorbed by the University of London in 1934. Price's attempt at a magical ritual atop the Brocken came about thanks in part to the writer Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Inspired by its mysterious atmosphere of the Harz region, Goethe set portions of his most famous play, FAUST, there, including the surreal Walpurgisnacht scene, where the devil leads Faust around the Brocken, observing witches and even a gorgon. Paganism died hard in the Harz country, Price would later write. Goethe died in 1832, but his legacy is celebrated around the Harz, and on the centennial anniversary of the author's death, Price got in on the festivities. That year, he and fellow philosopher C.E.M. Joad traveled to the Brocken to stage their own large-scale magical ritual. Price had come into possession of an arcane grimoire called the High German Black Book. One of the spells in the old book of magic is the Blocksberg Tryst, a ritual designed to transform a young male goat into a human boy. Blocksberg was an older name for the Brocken, and the directions for performing the Blocksberg Tryst stated that it could only successfully be performed atop a peak under the light of a winter's full moon. According to the elaborate ritual text, which I found, and it is hard to read, the he-goat must be led by a silken cord held by a maiden, and maiden is Mayden, pure of heart in fair white garments. The maiden was played by Ura Brown, better known as the film actress Gloria Gordon. Her IMDb is in the show notes if anyone's curious. Incense must be burned and a pine fire lit. Standing on a magical circle that had been drawn on the ground, the maiden must spin the goat 3 times, then pour wine over its head, while reciting some magical words. Begone, begone, ye profane ones. Following the preparations laid out in the book, Price had put together a truly arcane scene with a large magical circle set into the ground and incense burning away. The pictures are freaking amazing. Don't worry, I'm including them with the episode. The moon was somewhat obscured by clouds that night, but otherwise the ritual went off without a hitch, except for the fact that the goat did not turn into a boy. Maybe the lack of moonlight was the problem. I don't know. For the sake of science, Price and company came back the next night as well and performed the ritual a second time. The result was the same. No goat boy. Although, me being me, I'm like, but was it the height of the full moon? Did something happen there? Price claimed he carried out the experiment, if only to prove the fallacy of transcendental magic. Now, speaking of science and the paranormal, I would be remiss if I did not mention another famous inhabitant of the Brocken, another specter, with a scientific explanation behind it. Imagine hiking up the beautiful Harz Mountains alone, just enjoying nature, when you see something out of the corner of your eye. When you look, there is a tall, glowing, human-like figure lingering near you. This is a very common experience in the mountains, and really, as we now know, there's plenty of ghosts and fae it could be. I am honestly kind of wondering if people thought it was Heckelberg. There is a very famous legend that states that a man was walking alone early one morning when a giant glowing figure suddenly loomed over him. Panicked, he jumped off the mountain to his death. Brocken Mountain, part of the Harz Range and the highest peak in northern Germany, pulls mist on its slopes up to 300 days a year. When the number of foggy days in Burley is far fewer, there are frequent reports of sightings of the specter rising from the moors beside the dale. A Brocken specter occurs when the sun shines behind a person standing on a peak above clouds or fog, casting a magnified shadow and a large halo onto the misty depths below. This is due to a process called diffraction. Diffraction occurs when sunlight penetrates water droplets. It reflects off the sides and backscatters in the person and the sun's direction. The center of the specter, the shadow's head, is an abstract point directly opposite the sun, called the anti-solar point. A circular rainbow bends around it. The shadow's increased size is an illusion that takes place when the brain has no reference point by which to judge size, and interprets the shadow as bigger than it actually is. So, I thought this was really interesting and definitely needed to be stated on the podcast. Of course, I wonder if a lot of our stories of the Brocken come from this. This isn't the only place this happens, though, apparently. The other reason why I felt like this needed to be in the podcast is when you start looking up, like, Brocken ghosts or legends, you get this freaking continuously. So, I felt like it needed to be in there. It needed an honorable mention. A scientifically debunked ghost story, I guess. Over the last century, scientists have tried to recreate the conditions of this mysterious phenomenon. Scottish physicist Charles Thomas Rees Wilson conducted one such famous experiment. He was enthralled with natural optical illusions caused by weather. Wilson became fascinated with the Brocken specter after witnessing it in 1894 from the summit of Ben Nevis, Scotland's highest peak. I wonder, can we do this on Pikes Peak? Is this a... Okay, so I went down a little bit of a side rabbit hole. Brocken is 3,747 feet high, and the Scottish peak they were talking about is 4,413 feet high. Now, Pikes Peak, which is like right down the road from me, is 14,115. So I wonder. And maybe we're too high for it, because I've never heard of such a thing happening around here. But, another mystery to uncover, perhaps. Anyways. Years later, our buddy Wilson built a cloud chamber in the Cavish Laboratory at Cambridge University. While he didn't recreate the Brocken specter, the chamber's ability to detect radiation earned him the Nobel Prize in 1927. So, that's kind of cool. The Brocken specter is now a recognized phenomena, and now I have to figure out if it's anywhere near us, because that's kind of cool. I wonder if I can recreate it here. Interesting thoughts. Walpurgisnacht, when according to the belief of millions of people, the devil was abroad, when the graves were opened and the dead came forth and walked, when all evil things of earth and air and water held revel. This very place the driver had specially shunned. This was the depopulated village of centuries ago. This was where the suicide lay, and this was the place where I was, alone, unmanned, shivering with cold in a shroud of snow, with a wild storm gathering upon me. It took all my philosophy, all the religion I had been taught, all of my courage not to collapse in a paroxysm of fright. Dracula's Guess by Bram Stoker. Walpurgisnacht will always be associated with magic. A spell I found that is meant to be performed on Walpurgisnacht goes: a single woman could place a linen thread near a statue of the Virgin Mary. Then at midnight she would unravel it and recite the poem, "Thread I pull thee, Walpurga I pray thee, that thou show to me what my husband's like to be." This spell freaking amuses me. It just shows that magical people will always find a way to be magical, even if it's praying to a nun over a statue of the Virgin Mary. Come on, that's epic. I love it. And there's so many little Victorian things, little spells like this. Ugh, my heart. I love it. Some more Walpurgisnacht things to keep in mind if you decide to venture out into the moonlight. You may encounter a witch on their way to their meeting, or witness the celebratory cavorting of witches and other beasties. You are also more likely to encounter ghosts. Just saying, so many ghosts. And mischievous elementals. You can see mysterious lights and music, and even be at risk of permanently losing your shadow. Interesting. No matter what you think of witchcraft and magic, no one can deny its influence. It has historically been associated with empowered women. I think it's interesting that an area known for its witchcraft has some very interesting women's history. The adorable small nearby town of Quedlinburg was ruled by women for 800 years. King Heinrich I's widow, Matilda, founded a convent of aristocratic women in 936, and their granddaughter became the ruler of the town as the abbess in 966. The abbesses, love that word, of the convent ruled the city until 1802, when Napoleon Napoleon invaded and disbanded the abbey. Also, the first German woman to win the right to attend a university was a native of this same town. Dorothea Erzsechsen Ben was the first woman to receive the academic title of medical doctor in Germany in 1754. So who knows? Maybe there is some strong witchy blood in there still. Today, Walpurgisnacht is still celebrated by dressing up, trick-or-treating, and magic. It has had such a wonderful, rich history, and it is still fun to celebrate. Back when I was doing Witch Kids over on Heart and Horn during the pandemic, I gave a bunch of ideas for celebrating. So here you go. Put on your favorite witchy hat and witchy clothes. Grab your favorite bottle of wine or mead. Make sure to leave some out for the fae friends. Absinthe is also great for the thinning veil. Have a bonfire or light a bunch of candles. Remember to be safe. You can't blame me if you burn your house down. Have a party. Now, in the pandemic, it was Zoom, but now you can actually have a party. Have a full dance party in your living room. That sounds awesome. I've created this fun little playlist. I'll add that to the notes. Watch some of your favorite witchy movies. My favorite, Always and Forever, Practical Magic. Do some divination for yourself or friends. Tarot cards, throwing bones, those kind of thing. Put out bread and butter and or honey for the fae and other wandering spirits. Depending on your living situation, make a lot of noise. Ring bells, bang drums, crack whips, that kind of thing. That weird beating planks of wood into the ground again. Also, trick-or-treating. Totally set this up. Depending on roommates or friends, have people bring their favorite candies to share or pull small pranks on each other. And just throwing this out there, it's not my fault if you get yourself in trouble. Just saying. I just invited a friend over after the podcast live stream. And as much as I like pulling pranks on people, if you are listening, don't do them to me. Not my jam. Although, if you are listening, you should totally bring candy. Just saying. If you have no one to do this with, just buy a bunch of fancy chocolate and do some indulging. Why the hell not? That's awesome. So, yeah. That's about it for today. I'm really hoping you enjoyed this episode. It's so good to be back. Oh my god. And don't forget, we're going to be doing the live stream on Patreon when the night this comes out. So hopefully you can jump on and hang out. Thank you to everyone out there listening today. My Haunted Life podcast is written, researched, produced, edited, and hosted by me, Angela Hartshorn. All of my sources are going to be on the Patreon page. I need to do some work on the podcast page, let's be honest. I would say all my sources will be in the show notes, but I went a little insane with research this time. There's 2 freaking pages of just sources. So I didn't want that clogging everything up. But I will definitely post everything on the Patreon page. So make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. If you are interested in more pictures, videos, and info for this week's episode, make sure to check out the Patreon page and that fancy live stream we're doing. If you like what you hear and want to support the show, please subscribe to the Patreon page. To support the show is only $2 a month is the lowest thing. I am trying to do more and more just like publicly free stuff as well. So, if you have any information on today's episodes, like ghost stories, and maybe you've encountered your own witch on a goat on the way to the top of a mountain to party, email me at myhauntedlifepodcast@gmail.com. Also, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok if we still have it, and now YouTube. I'm really going to start doing more with YouTube because I really like it. I'm surprised how much I like it. All that at My Haunted Life Podcast. While you're there, please like and follow and comment. Honestly, comments, they make my day. Validation. Give me some validation, please. And let's not forget the podcast group. We have a lot of fun over there most of the time. Big shout out to our Kayla. Dun 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 dun! Because I guess technically it's a little confusing when you record these so far ahead. Technically, we'll be one day late for Kayla's birthday. But as of recording, we're still early. So, happy birthday, babe! Love you! Our wonderful and great moderator over there. I adore her. That's like my longest friend right there, you guys. And yeah, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we will see you guys not next week, but 2 weeks from now. And until then, stay spooky.